Meeting of Wednesday, March 20th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. Mr. Winarski, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon. Please rise for a moment of silent meditation and Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. President, as always, I would ask that we remember those in our community as we go into this moment of meditation and prayer that are less fortunate than we are, those that have lost loved ones in our community since the last time we were in these chambers. And one in particular, matriarch in our community, Azaleen Ratcliffe, her and her husband started one of the longest, I won't say longest, but a very significant church and ministry in this community back in the 50s. And she passed this morning, first day of spring, and on her 89th birthday. And so we want to take a moment to remember her family and in our prayers and in our thoughts. And finally, I ask that we ask our God and Creator to give us the wisdom to make the best decisions that are needed for the citizens of the city of Erie. A pledge of allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes from the City Council meeting of Wednesday, March 6th, 2019, and bills for payment on March 15th and 22nd, 2019. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Ms. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski.
Next on our agenda, is there anybody here this evening for a repository sale? Anybody here this evening for a repository sale? Hearing none, brings us to citizens to be heard. We have the Executive Director of the Erie Water Authority here this evening who signed in. I would ask Mr. Wojtek here if he could please give us 5 minutes of his time. Thank you.
Winarski. Yeah, I just wanted to come and maybe just give a little update on the state of your water, the public drinking water here in Erie. There were some comments made and some concerns about the quality of the water, and I just wanted to assure everybody, as we installed our state-of-the-art filtration system down at the Wasilewski Water Treatment Plant, we put out some of the best water you could find anywhere in the world. There was a lot of discussion about lead, and there was a recent news story about the Emerson Gridley found a little high lead level with one of their samples. We've been working with the school district to address that. They did a total of 17 samples, 17 different facilities. That was the only one that came out of the normal acceptable range. It was 15.9 parts per billion. 15 parts per billion is the action level. All the other samples taken by the Erie School District fell within that. Of the 16 others, I believe 6 were undetectable, or less than 1 part per billion. So we're working with them to see what it was just an anomaly, or if there was a mistreatment of the sample, or what happened. And I'm sure that the school district is all over that to try to get that resolved in that facility. As a water utility that services most of Northwest Pennsylvania, we are required to do lead sampling of our own. After the Flint, Michigan issue, we prior to the Flint, Michigan problem, we were only required to do 100 samples every 3 years. After the Flint, everybody kind of ratcheted up. We had to do 200 samples per year. Because our samples have been very acceptable and very low, we've been reduced to 100 per year. Our last sampling that we did, we do them twice a year. We try to get 50 per round. We got 58, and of the 58 samples that were taken, 48 had a non-detectable level of lead in the water sample. Non-detectable means less than 1 part per billion. Of the remaining 10, 5 had less than 2 parts per billion, and the other 5, I think they ranged anywhere from 2 to 4, but nothing approached the 15 parts per million. It's the action level. And please note that when we do these samples, we are expected and required to find the highest probable, most risky areas that we could find. The DEP requires us to find houses that were built before a certain year, or people that may have lead solder in their joints, or that have, you know, lead service lines coming in. We are required to find the most at-risk areas that we can find, and they've come back very well. We have an additive that we put into the water, orthopolyphosphate, that creates a microfilm, a biofilm in the pipes, and it helps protect the water. There were some comments about possibly the addition of fluoride might add to the lead level. We looked at our last set of samples prior to the addition of fluoride in 1999, and the samples we're getting now are actually lower than what we got back then. And I believe it's because of the biofilm that is created by the orthophosphate that we add to the water. So I just wanted to put the public's mind at ease, put the council's mind at ease, that I like to see the cups with water in it, not bottles. So thank you very much. It's safe to drink. We deliver it to your home every day. And if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. If not, I hope that's less than 5 minutes.
Mr. President.
Sure.
I know we don't do this with the traditional,
You always try to break it.
well, I'm a tradition breaker, but in relation to citizens to be heard, I think Mr. Wojtek's in a different position as
Correct.
head of an authority.
I agree.
So I wanted to preface that before I did a dialogue. So other part of the comments that were made by citizens were in related to fluoride, and you did touch on that for a moment. And I know that you are not a fluoride expert, and you will not have a conversation of substance that way or debate on that, and that's not what I'm asking. But that is a concern for probably more citizens who come than the ones who come to the microphone. And so for me, it's either, I think it's information, in finding ways to get that information out, because this has been coming back for multiple years since I've been on council, the question of fluoride and its benefit or not. So is there a way that we can, and we talked about it in back, so I'm not asking you a question that you haven't been willing to give an answer to.
Yeah, well,
Can we do something to kind of put in a public space to, you know, give individuals an expert that they can ask those questions to?
yeah, and I know it's a very divisive topic, as we all know. But yeah, I would be happy to try to assemble. I can, here's the thing, I could tell you what I believe are the benefits to fluoride, but I am not an expert, so I'm no different than anybody else who can access the internet, okay? I have worked with the group that was lobbying to get it in, and the information they provided, the science that they provided, generally accepted science for the best way to improve the health of the entire community. And it was voted on by our board back in, I think, 2000 or 2001. And because we used to do those 3-year things, that's why 99 was the last set of samples before that. And I'd be more than happy to try to put something together. We maybe use your facilities here for something like that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Tom Stas Stashewski. I live at 150 East 36th Street. I'm here this evening to express continued concern over the lack of any activity on the bayfront at the GAF site. I'm not aware of any progress. I'm not aware of any reports other than one of the local TV stations inquiring about the status of the former GAF site. I fully realize and am cognizant of the fact that council has nothing to do per se with bayfront development. That's more of an authority, the Municipal Authorities Act out of Harrisburg. Yet I believe it should be of interest to council members, particularly when the city is faced with an $11 million budget deficit, when our budget is in disarray, when we have budget woes. How come we're not tapping into the best resource we have in the city of Erie, our beloved bayfront and Lake Erie? There seems to be a lot of apathy, a lot of spinning of wheels, and nothing happening there. And I bring this to our attention now because also with the McAllister building being leveled, I hope we've already learned lessons that just sitting back and waiting for the GIF to move is not going to be the same thing to do with McAllister. Yet I do have something very comprehensive and very concrete to share with you. I've been studying and evaluating other cities that dug out of their economic woes by capitalizing on their waterfronts. I have a whole list of cities I've been examining, cities like Nashville and Alexandria, Virginia, and Chattanooga, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, and Cincinnati, and Greenville, South Carolina, and Pittsburgh, Baltimore. And most importantly, if you're not aware of Buffalo, we should be aware of how Buffalo turned their economy around because of waterfront economic development that was of a private sector, taxable real estate revenue taxes going to the local governments. Not any type of tax-free, tax-exempt zones, but Buffalo at one time was the third poorest city in this whole country, and they turned that all around primarily because of their very aggressive, optimistic, spirited campaign to use their waterfront, to use their canals, and to bring in entertainment complexes, businesses, research firms, restaurants, taxable residential mixed income housing, recreational facilities. All sorts of things are happening in Buffalo with their canals and with the Lake Erie neighbors that we have. And people said it couldn't be done in Buffalo because of the cold weather. In fact, last year, the superintendent of schools in Buffalo proudly proclaimed that his district was becoming more and more solvent. His district was digging out of their financial crisis primarily due to the success of the economic revitalization of Buffalo's waterfront, and that their school district should be solvent and have long-term sustainability because of all the tax revenue that is coming forth. So let's examine that. We're not doing that in Erie. We're doing the opposite. We built buildings very quickly that generate not a penny, not a dime of tax revenue. What's with this cruise ship terminal? Cruise ship terminal, not collecting any taxes? Since that was built, that cruise ship terminal, there are 2 private companies that now offer cruises among the 5 Great Lakes, seasonal, of course. Why not take an effort to bring Erie as one of the destination ports on those 2 new businesses that are cruising all of the 5 Great Lakes, wherever there's the connections and the channels and so forth to connect them? We should do that here. Let's move forward and generate some much needed tax revenue at GAF, at the McAllister site, and we need to be more creative, more imaginative. Each of those cities I mentioned, I've personally been there. I was either there on vacation or there on business, and they're alive, they're thriving. The waterfront is no match to our bayfront. We're talking about waterfront that could be rivers, that could be harbors, oceans, lakes, whatever the case might be, but nothing compares to our pristine bayfront, which has pretty much been gobbled up without a penny coming into our tax coffers. So we've been relying upon taxing homeowners on fixed incomes, but yet letting all these non-taxable properties take up much needed valuable space on the bayfront. Let's change that. Let's look at ways of developing some revenue. We need a very optimistic campaign. You should see those campaigns that were launched from those cities. They came out with like a banner, glorious, optimistic approach. Let's convert and let's reclaim the waterfront, they were saying, especially Buffalo. You got to check it out firsthand. It's really amazing. Good evening, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Just a reminder, we have time for one more citizen to be heard. At 8 o'clock, we do have a scheduled public hearing. So at 8 o'clock, we'll have our public hearing, and as soon as that is ceased, then we will go back to citizens to be heard. Thank you.
My name's Freda Tepfer. I live at 1738 West 23rd Street in Erie. I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. I came to speak about 2 things. I really would hope that the city, which has formed a whole bunch of task forces and groups, would form a pedestrian and bicycle task force. I've been successful at raising issues about pedestrian access for people with based on needs of people with disabilities and mobility challenges, but really everybody is a pedestrian in the city, and it needs a special group to address it. I think it's really important with the city, with all these large construction projects like Erie Insurance, the Allegheny Building, the Velocity Net, whatever's going to go on at UPMC. All these projects that are asking the city to endorse their RACP applications, that they be designed to ensure pedestrian access during construction. Any project should be designed to ensure pedestrian access during this construction. And I see the city has taken up putting in the little bar at the bottom, and I was able to make a point that that was needed. The second point I'm here for is I am here today to talk about an item that was in the published agenda and in the paper this morning, and I'm here to talk about it today because it's why I'm here today. I'm here to talk about a community college, and why community colleges are important to me is because I would not have had the life that I've had. I would have not have been able to finish college or had a career if I did not have the environment that only community colleges can provide, only a place-based community college. A place where people can go and take classes and do a little exploration and have this kind of support and closeness and simplicity and lower cost of education that only a community college can provide. And the Northwest Regional College or some kind of thing that's going to be online, it's going to take a course from here and there and not have that place-based component, it will not provide the kind of support that people need to succeed in school. And I went to community college in New York for a year and a half, and because my first year I went to school somewhere and then I dropped out, and I was a non-traditional student, and I was able to thrive in the community college. I was able to get people to help me sort out my goals so that when I transferred to Cornell and I graduated successfully from there, I was ready to go. But I didn't just stop there. As an adult living in Washington State, I went to community college several different times. One time paid for by my union as part of my job enhancement. And the courses that I took in community college, I was able to use towards the O&M certification program that I was in. I actually worked for a community college as a scribe, helping people who had disability issues in their test taking, and I even worked for a community college within a state penitentiary supervising study hall for their 2-year degree students. Community colleges, they just, and everywhere that I lived, the community college provided a focus, a place for the community to come. There were programs. I mean, I don't know if you know the kinds of supports that are there. They're for people who have problems needing to get their GED, their ABE. I help tutor ESL students, people who need support because of they're not quite ready and they need to take some background courses. So I know that there was previously a resolution passed by this body that Dave Brennan had brought forward, but the malady is still present. The disease has not been cured, and that's because we need to go to the doctor one more time and pass more resolutions and get our state legislature to move to support this community college. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we'll take a 2-minute break here and get set up for our public hearing. Just so everybody is aware, the public hearing this evening is regarding three different properties to get some zoning recommendations changed, and we'll be hearing who would be for these changes, who will be against, and the city's recommendation, or the planning commission's. Close enough to 8 o'clock, Rose?
Oh, sure, it's approximately 8, so
Good.
we're good.
And I guess we can get started. You read it, Rose?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that-
Pursuant to the provisions of zoning ordinance number 80, 2005 and the proper legal advertising. The City Council will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, March 20th, 2019 at approximately 8 p.m. in City Council chambers to consider a request for, number one, amend Section 201.14 RLB Residential Limited Business Use District to add eating and drinking establishment and limited retail business uses to the permitted uses list. And number two, amend Section 205 lot, yard, and height requirements to increase the maximum height of a structure in feet from 35 to 45 in the RLB use district. And number three, request submitted by John Mailer of McDonald, Ehrlich, Jones, and Britton LLP, representing Shari Endeavors, requesting the rezoning of 3 parcels from R3 High Density Residential to RLB Residential Limited Business as amended.
I think at this point, I'd like to get Mr. Welsh up here, Jake Welsh from the zoning office, just to explain in layman's terms what the public hearing is officially about on the recommendations and what the folks are asking for. Normally, I know you come up at the end, but since there's multiple ones here, I know we're trying to consolidate 2 of them. Is that correct?
That's correct. The amendments are related to each other based on the request from the property owner for the rezoning of the 3 properties. My name's Jake Welsh, Chief Zoning Officer and Secretary of the Planning Commission for the City of Erie. And I am here today to read the recommendation of the Planning Commission regarding the request. I'll go ahead and read that verbatim from a memo.
Mr. President, excuse me, Jake, would it be more appropriate, and I may be out of line, if I am, wouldn't be the first time, to not hear the recommendation, but maybe just clarity?
That's what I was.
Yeah, not so much the recommendation at this point,
Just
but
the clarity of what is being proposed. Save your recommendation for after the
for and
for
against.
and the against.
Right.
If,
Thank you, Mr. President.
thank you, Mr. Jones.
That's fine, thank you, thank you. By way of providing some background then on the request, we do have the property owner had approached the city requesting a possible rezoning of 3 properties in the Fifth and Cranberry area. That request was submitted for the Planning Commission's consideration by council to have the Planning Commission review that request, gather information and input from not only the property owner but any other interested parties, and really through a thorough review of that request, several things came to light. Not only the specific rezoning request and what was most appropriate as far as potentially rezoning the property, which is currently now zoned R3, which is a high-density residential district that's actually surrounded on 3 sides by a residential limited business district, and on the other side across the street by a medium-density residential district. And so really the obligation of the Planning Commission is to look at that in a number of different ways. What does the city's comprehensive plan say about that area of the city moving forward as far as potential land uses? What makes the most sense if a rezoning were to be recommended for that area? What are the permitted uses, not only in R3, the current district for those 3 properties, but for RLB, the residential limited business surrounding it, potentially for C1, which was an initial proposition to rezone that property to C1, which is a local commercial district. So the Planning Commission reviewed and compared all of those permitted use tables for all 3 of those potential districts, the current district as well as the one requested and the one surrounding the existing property. That's kind of the background for the thought process and the review process for the planning commission to follow and gather input from potentially anybody that's potentially affected.
But normally, just for the citizens' knowledge of this, normally it would just be a property that would be looking for a possible zone change, but considering all these properties are adjacent and it's the same owner or it's in the same area, they were all brought together in one public hearing?
Yeah, essentially it was one request, the three properties being requested to be rezoned or under common ownership. The other thought process involved was looking at the district regulations themselves to look at the appropriateness of the current regulations for not only the existing district, but the proposed district as well.
Okay. I think at this point, I would like to have anybody speak who is for the zoning change. Please step forward, and we'll bother you, Mr. Welsh, in a few minutes, okay? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Mailer, and as the minutes indicated, I'm with the law firm of McDonald, Illig, Jones, and Britton. I'm very pleased and proud to be here tonight on behalf of Chiari Endeavors, the owner of this property. It's described as 3 properties, but it's really one site. It's the property that sits north of the pharmacy at 6th and Cranberry, sort of between the pharmacy and the 2 existing office buildings. So it's really one site. It's privately owned by my client, and it's going to be developed. It's not going to remain as it is. Those of us who are old enough might remember a long time ago, this was the site of a power plant that sat there, and it was then an eyesore for many years until the Bayfront Parkway went through and some other things have happened. As Mr. Welsh has indicated, the property that we're talking about tonight is currently zoned R3. That's high-density residential. So as currently zoned, the property could be developed using up to 50% of the lot. It could be up to 100 feet tall and 9 stories. That's not what's being proposed. I want to repeat that. That's not what's being proposed. The proposal, and again, I think Jake did a nice job of summarizing what has been a very long, thoughtful process by the city's own planning professionals. We had several hearings before the Planning Commission. We had a number of speakers who spoke quite eloquently and compellingly about some changes that the city zoning ordinance required in order for development to start to happen in the city. And those changes were again undertaken by the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to City Council tonight that were very specific. They were introduced as part of the discussion about what's before City Council tonight, but the change recommended by the Planning Commission was to change the RLB designation under the zoning ordinance to the height limitation would increase from 35 feet to 45 feet, not 100, and that dining and limited retail uses would be permitted under RLB. Again, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended that City Council make that change to the city's zoning ordinance. Also before Council tonight is a specific request relating to this specific property to change the zoning. Again, it's currently zoned R3. We're proposing a change to RLB, which does a couple of things. First of all, the site that we're talking about is really an island of R3 and a sea of RLB. So I think you've seen a picture of that. I'm not going to pass this around, but the site is in the middle of the entire block on the west side of Cranberry, which is all zoned RLB. So it's only this site that's R3. So the change we're seeking, that we've asked council to make, and which the planning commission has unanimously recommended, is that it would make this property zoned just as the other property surrounding it is. It also would make the zoning of this site consistent with the current uses of the surrounding properties. Specifically, the pharmacy to the south, the offices to the north and west, and there's apartments across Cranberry. I think that's at 3rd or 4th and Cranberry Street. So the proposed rezoning is consistent with the zoning of surrounding properties. It's consistent with surrounding uses of property. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan, as Mr. Welsh has indicated, and it's a change which your planning commission and planning professionals have unanimously recommended. So we would urge you to make these changes to the zoning ordinance, and specifically with regard to the RLB zone districts, and to change the zoning of this specific piece of property. And I'll be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Council, any questions?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. We have anyone else here tonight to speak in favor?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dan Young. I live in the corner of 5th and Raspberry, just a block up the street from where the proposed site is for development. I am in favor of any development of that property because it's an overgrown weed patch. People use it to dump garbage. Feral animals come up into our neighborhood, get into the garbage cans. I have had a skunk at one time under my front porch. I've had a possum that I had to get an exterminator to remove under my front porch. That property, I've lived at 502 Raspberry for 65 years. And there has never been anything in that property. Just to make one slight correction, the Penelec building was on the north side of 5th Street. That has always been a vacant lot. Back when we were kids, we called ourselves the Bay Rats. We would borrow our dad's lawnmowers and mow the weeds down and make a baseball field there. Now there are so many trees there, I think you'd need a lumberjack to do that. From the neighborhood viewpoint, the aesthetics of putting in any sort of development has got to be an improvement. From the city's viewpoint, it's got to increase the revenue in taxes. I've heard concerns that there'd be an increase of traffic at the intersection of 5th and Cranberry. Cranberry is already a raceway, and it would be housed to the neighborhood to have a 4-way stop sign put in at the intersection of 5th and Raspberry, or stop lights. People coming off the connector, going south on Cranberry, or people coming down 6th Street, getting onto the connector, are exceeding the speed limit. And when I often take Cranberry north and then turn onto 5th Street to get to my house, it's a very sharp turn, and on several occasions, very nearly been rear-ended by cars exceeding the speed limit. Basically, third thing that I would like to just mention, I know that it's not part of this project, but I would like to bring it up. The Bayfront connector desperately needs a stoplight at the Cranberry Street exit. It is dangerous. Cars routinely going west will jump into the left-hand lane and exceed the speed limit to pass other cars they think are going too slow. Pedestrians are incredibly put at risk trying to cross to get to the other side of the, I guess you would call it the Bayfront walkway. And it's just an accident waiting to happen. I'm surprised that there hasn't been somebody killed trying to cross that street. We have a lot of summer events that are happening down at the Leary Street. We get people that, will walk down from our neighborhood, and the only way we can get to the Bayfront safely is to take the Cascade Street walkway, which then will take you down to Liberty Street where there's a traffic light to cross the Bayfront Connector safely. I think that's all I have to say on the matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. Regarding the zoning issues relative to this proposal, I certainly want to speak in favor of taking spot zoning properties and making them conform to their context. That's a no-brainer. That should happen. What I'm concerned about is the methodology that reminds me of the Prep Events Center issue, where in the usage.
Excuse me, I guess, and I know you're trying to do an analogy or whatever, you're speaking in favor of this zoning change for this property?
Yes, in respect to it being zoned to be more compatible to its neighbors, absolutely. Spot zoning is bad, basically. So that's a good thing. However, I referenced the Prep Event Center because when that project retooled the M use of the zoning ordinance, it changed permitted uses for a specific project so that the specific project could then be free and clear of any encumbrances from that point on. And what I am concerned about is a better mechanism for doing that is in place. It's called a non-conforming use. There's a reason why that mechanism exists. That's because if a property has peculiar circumstances which warrants giving it variances to work, that's fine. You just, what I'm proposing, or I'm asking, I guess, why this isn't how it's being done. If we're gonna make it an RLB, then why not make it a non-conforming use in an RLB? What that does is that protects the city's interest from that point forward on what happens with that site. So they get approved for the project they're telling you they're gonna do, okay? Later, if they wanna change it, they have to come back. And the city has discretion still at its preference to review it and see if the new change is still acceptable, okay? But to go in and retool the zoning ordinance, your basic mechanism of regulation for one project so that this one project cannot have to ever come back if they want to change again, I find that very concerning to me. That I would say that such a task or such an exercise is appropriate if the zoning department gets multiple questions about this not being a permitted use in RLB. If there's a case to be made for actually changing the zoning ordinance, then yes, we should deliberate on that. But for one project, you should never just go change the zoning ordinance. Use a mechanism that's provided to you to protect the city's interests, which is a non-conforming use. So, maybe there's a justification for it. I don't know all the details, but I do want to make that known that there are alternatives to changing the zoning ordinance, because that's a big thing to do. A lot of work went into creating that ordinance. You don't want to shortchange all the deliberations that were done to craft that ordinance the way it is today. Okay, so I don't know if anyone can speak to why a non-conforming use isn't the mechanism they're using here, but that's what I wanted to share.
Walsh speaks on that. Anyone else speak in favor? Anyone else to speak in favor of this proposal? Please. Any to speak against? Anyone here this evening to speak against this zoning change? With that, I believe Mr. Walsh, if you would come up and give the Planning Commission's recommendations. And I don't know if you can answer any of Mr. Trott's concern regarding how exactly we do these zoning changes or.
Thank you. I can provide some insight into why the Planning Commission has also recommended the changes to the district regulations for RLB. It is related to the fact that we have over time received many variance requests for those uses to occur, or there are many examples of existing non-conforming properties in the city of Erie in the residential limited business district that are either eating and drinking establishments or limited retail businesses. So we've had both requests for variances to operate those types of businesses in RLB districts, and also the presence of many of those existing businesses that are considered non-conforming because they predated the existing zoning ordinance. The ordinance itself has been in effect since 2005. That's quite a long time to go with any kind of land use ordinance without some modest updates. I would suggest that we may need to do a more comprehensive update of the zoning ordinance. The Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code recommends that anytime a city adopts a new comprehensive plan, it should look at all their land use regulations to make sure that they are still consistent with that new comprehensive plan. And since the city does have a plan that was just adopted, you know, just a short time ago, a couple years ago, now would be a very appropriate time to kind of look at a more comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance, for one. And I think that that's what the Planning Commission wanted to do. Yes, it's related to a request for a rezoning of this particular property, but what this did was further expose that the zoning ordinance itself and the district regulations contained in the zoning ordinance do need some updating. So this was in response to that as well.
Mr.
So,
President.
very good.
Mr. President, may I ask, or just for clarity, also, so as this process goes forward, say things go as are requested, things pass, excuse me, and the changes are made both in the ordinance as well as this project is approved, everything that is able to happen in that zone is already approved. So this particular individual, or this ownership or this group couldn't come back and do something strange in that area because of what we're doing now. There's already a box of things that are allowed in that particular zone, approved businesses, approved facilities, approved uses. So there's no something randomly out of the sky that they could change if they wanted to tweak this project, something that we would have to, or excuse me, have it already approved by it being in that zone already. That's when it would come back for some kind of a, you know, a different type of use again. But I guess what I'm saying is, what's already there, once we make these changes, if they happen, there's a set of things that can happen in that particular zone already. You can't just randomly come and do something different that's not already approved by the zoning ordinance, correct?
That's correct.
Right, because I just know that one of the citizens had mentioned, you know, if they want to change their idea and they want to do something so crazy and we don't approve it, it still has to fit in the regulation of the zoning ordinance and what's allowed in that particular zone according to the ordinance.
Correct.
Thank you. If you want to continue.
I will do a formal reading of the Planning Commission recommendation at this time, and obviously be happy to answer any additional questions. So the Planning Commission at their regular meeting of January 15th voted unanimously to recommend that council approve the proposed amendments, and I'll restate those amendments. Amend section 204.14 RLB Residential Limited Business Use District to add eating and drinking establishment and limited retail business uses to the permitted uses list. Amend section 205 lot, yard, and height requirements to increase the maximum height of structure in feet from 35 to 45 in the residential limited use, or limited business use district, sorry. And also rezone the 3 parcels from R3 high density residential to RLB residential limited business as amended. There was reasons for the recommendation. They recommended the amendments be adopted in consideration of the following factors. The rezoning would be an appropriate expansion of an existing RLB district, which was pointed out earlier. The rezoning and proposed amendments are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan. Under the future land uses, the plan implementation scenario in the comp plan, it identifies this area for residential development with supportive commercial uses, which is precisely what an RLB district provides, a mix of residential and commercial uses. Also, the County Department of Planning, who were required to notify anytime there's an amendment to a land use regulation, had indicated that the rezoning is generally consistent with the county's comprehensive plan, which states that residential and commercial uses are suitable in the county's designated growth area. Those are the factors involved in the Planning Commission recommendation. Be happy to answer
Any other questions from council?
Mr. President, no, I don't want to overtalk it, but just for clarity, if this is maybe a recommendation or something for us to consider, when we have particular projects that whether they may or may not benefit from a zoning ordinance change, is there a way of doing the recommended ordinance change separate from the project, right? Instead of clumping them in, because it does seem to, maybe just my naivete, but just it all seems like it does go together, and we're doing this for this group. Although they would benefit, and it's appropriate based on the Planning Commission and the zoning officers, assessment of the situation that you explained very clearly, and I appreciate that. But maybe if we can have a separate, the change or a requested change of our ordinance separate from any project, I think sometimes it'd just be a little bit better clarity for the citizen and even for us, possibly. So it's not just all together. It's, here's this, we want to change this ordinance because we think it needs to happen separately, but connected, of course. These are the other things that we're looking to change and to move forward with. So that's just my opinion, maybe, suggestion, if we separate them next time.
Well, and I think that as they were advertised as separate hearings, separate but consecutive hearings. So they are two separate actions, one to consider the amendments to the RLB regulations and also to consider the rezoning of the property specifically. So I know that's how it was put out to the public, that there are two separate recommendations. We're just kind of lumping the public hearing together at this point.
Sure. So I guess my question then would be, this is a point of order maybe for our solicitor, do we need to have two separate, even if it's a formality of starting one and closing and then having the second public hearing, and we say, hey, everything we said about that before, you know what I mean? Because if we are merging the conversation, we're not actually fulfilling what we advertised as two separate meetings, or is that semantics?
I think it's semantics. It's not a meeting, it's a public hearing. And since both issues affect one another, to consolidate them for the purpose of allowing testimony and having one book of record is I think appropriate. But technically you're having two hearings, and if you're going to ultimately vote on this, you're gonna have two separate votes.
Right. And I think we should have two separate votes.
You have to.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yes.
okay.
But I think for the sake of the public hearing, we just consolidate because they were all the same.
Yeah, and I think we just articulate that in the minutes of this public hearing, because if we advertise for two, then people may, I mean, it's a technicality, but when we sometimes ignore technicalities, weird things happen later. And so I just want to be aware that if we're going to consolidate, we need to say that in the public record. We need to say that these are the same topic or related topics. We had the dialogue and testimony within one public hearing around these topics, and from there, whatever the vote process is, I think we need to do that. But I just wanted to be clear.
I would agree with my colleague. I think perception and transparency, if for no other reason, just to make it look.
And I think that was part of our introduction was, although it was three different items, they were all related, and that's why we just consolidated to extend.
No, absolutely, and as the clerk just showed me, they will be voted on separately. And so I don't doubt that, I understand, I trust that. I'm just saying, because it is important that we advertise what we're going to do. If we're gonna advertise two separate meetings, and again, I'm probably on semantics or whatever, but just for a point of consistency and what happens next time when these things aren't so smooth. I think we just wanna make sure we have things in order and be aware of that. So that's all, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you.
Certainly, certainly.
Just leave it.
I don't know if council is aware, but Japan Street, which is immediately west of this lot, used to run from 8th Street down to 5th Street. Currently, from 6th to 5th Street, Japan Street is overgrown with trees and weeds. Does the city have any idea about reopening Japan Street?
I guess at this point, unfortunately, that has nothing to do with this public hearing. I probably shouldn't even let you ask the question at this point, but
I understand.
I appreciate a follow-up if you would, and at this point, I believe we are going to close this public hearing. Regarding this, we already had our fors and against, ma'am.
I wasn't going to say anything, but even if Danny thinks, after living there all those years, that we can go down there and see a stop sign and get onto the bayfront, he's out of his mind, and so is everybody else. I'm telling you, the last time I went down that way by accident and went onto the bayfront, I waited for 77 cars. Sorry.
Okay.
It needs much more than a stop sign.
Okay. Thank you.
Traffic is horrible.
We'll need your name for the record, but as of right now, the public hearing's over. If anybody would like to speak in the citizens to be heard format of this, they can bring these comments up in that. Okay, we're going back to our citizens to be heard. Please step up, state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Terry Twilley.
Excuse me?
My name is Terry Twilley.
Address?
I live at 516 East 21st Street, Erie, PA. I came today because I have a problem, and I don't know where else to go. I want to start off by saying I need help, and I don't know where to get it. Basically, I have, my roof is leaking, and it has been leaking for the past 5 years. It's very, very hard living in a house with a leaking roof. It's traumatic. I have gone to, let me see, I tried to write them down. I know it's kind of discombobulated, but I went to Molino, I went to GCAC, I went to St. Joseph, I went to Redevelopment Authority, I went to the Salvation Army, I went to Habitat for Humanity, I went to Serve Erie, I went to Sisters of St. Joseph out West 26th Street. I have been through a multitude of different places. I fill out applications and I only get sorry no. I feel like my safety is in danger in my home, but I am poor. I cannot afford to fix it. The Redevelopment Authority told me that they cannot help me because if they can't do all of the work, they won't do none of the work. And all I want is my roof fixed. I don't care if they fix anything else. I don't care. I just want to be safe in my home. I also have spoken to people and they told me, well, you can live somewhere else. That's what they told me. You can live somewhere else. They offer me other housing, but I own my house. I don't want to live in somebody else's home. I don't want to live in somebody else's apartment where I'm going to pay and not own my home. That's what I work so hard for. And then they said something about me being in my home for so long. I have a 30-year mortgage. I've been in my house 15 years. I just want to stay in my home. I don't know what else to do. I don't know where else to go. So I'm coming here because I need help. I don't want to be that person you see on the news and say that if she had a call, or she had a went and she had a asked for help, we could have helped her. So I'm coming here because I need help. It is very, very hard living in the conditions that I live in. It's very, very hard. And the other part would be, I don't have transportation. I can't drive. I go all around collecting the information that they say they need, only to get a no. That is depressing. That is overwhelming. I just need help. And I just don't know what else to do. So I came here because I need help. I want to live and I want to stay in my home. And if they have a grant that I could have, oh wait, because I don't know, because I'm worried because I only have 5 minutes and I know I talk too much. The other thing would be, they offer me loans that they will put a burden on me more than I can bear. If they offer me a loan and I'm already poor, then they will only put me in a deeper prison. I don't want to be in jail. I want to live free. To some degree, I am not free because I can't live in my home in a free environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
They're out of the print. I talked to her yesterday.
Hello there.
Hi, I'm Al Richardson, 27 Niagara Pier, Erie 16502. I've lived in Erie, in the city, since I moved to Erie from Philadelphia in 1975. I'm here to speak for the second resolution under new business, having the City Council support the Empower Erie's work to make an Erie County Community College a reality. I know there are many reasons for and against such a community college, but I am convinced that the benefits will far exceed all realistic costs of such a college. For more than the past 5 years, I've been involved with an organization known as Erie Together. It's funded by the United Way of Erie County, and the ongoing effort of Erie Together has been to alleviate poverty in the city of Erie, in the community. One of the early things they did many years ago was to survey other cities that had programs that were working to alleviate poverty. And one of the things I know they found that was in common to all other cities, including Cincinnati, where I grew up, was a community college. All programs that were working well to alleviate poverty were in communities where there was a community college of the kind that we need here in Erie County. It needs to be accessible to folks who live in the city and use public transportation, and it needs to have a curriculum to help folks either further their education or be qualified for jobs that are available in the community. Please consider that motion, that resolution, and vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Shelley Rhodes, 1440 West 39th Street, in here in Erie.
And the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to compliment you guys on passing the alternative lawn/weed ordinance. I think that's going to be a positive thing. Even though I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I have in my alternative lawn/weeds, being that it's a new building. The other thing I'd like to bring up is I'd like to ask, again, for a consideration for a pedestrian and bike task force. I am a pedestrian. The state won't let me drive. I'm not quite sure why. I don't think it's fair. Personally, I would really love to get one of those self-driving cars. I think that'd be really cool. But as of now, I'm stuck as a pedestrian, and so I do encounter a lot of things on the city streets. I will say that plowing, yay, I hope is over for the winter, and hopefully that will cut down on some of the challenges. But there are definitely some major concerns in the city that are related to people who are pedestrians, either by choice or not. And it would be good to have an advisory on that topic. I'd also like to say that as a county resident for many years, until August 10th of last year, one thing that we would ask if the community college becomes a reality is if it would be available and accessible to the county as well as the city. Coming into downtown can be quite a challenge coming from the county. My brother attended community college. My brother is a veteran, and when he was out of the Navy, he had his GED, and so he was able to take those fundamental basic courses. One of the main concerns you need to think about when you're considering a community college is make sure that the courses are transferable so that you have your requirements and you're able to take them to another local college and use them towards your degree. Another advantage that a community college can have is if, for example, you do need to take some additional courses, or you want to take a course just to learn additional things. I'm currently taking an online course on Excel. I grew up in the time of Lotus 1, 2, 3. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but Excel is an entirely different critter, and unfortunately, I now need to know how to use it for my job. Luckily, it is a free course, and it's provided by actually an Institute for the Blind out of Winnetka, Illinois. But having those resources. The other thing I'd like to bring up is if a community college is available, oftentimes they will allow seniors to take the courses for free, and I'm hoping that Erie would continue that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so the citizens are aware of this, you're more than welcome to still speak regarding it, but number 2 under new business, the resolution for the city's support at this time, or council support, has been pulled off the agenda for tonight's meeting. It's going to be put on at a later date. Just want anybody to know that, everybody.
Okay, Adam Trott, 531 West 6th Street, second floor. Several items I want to touch base on. One, just to further clarify for Curtis, the analogy that the permitted uses of a zoning creates a box, that's a good analogy. And the request is to enlarge that box. What I want to make sure is done is that there were, I'm sure, quite a few bars or restaurants that were in a neighborhood street. I'm sure they existed. So I think to do the process right, you need to go back and ask what prevented them from making that a permitted use in the RLB. Critical to the RLB is the LB, limited business. The point is that a street is primarily residential, but you will allow limited business to occur. For example, if someone wants a live-work facility where they live on the 2nd and 3rd floor and they have their accounting office on the 1st floor, you know, that's a very compatible use for a neighborhood street. That's a type of limited business. The drinking and eating establishment, I think it can work as long as the scope of that is restrained, because you don't want to blow away the calmness of a residential street. Like, for example, Bella's at 18th and Liberty, that could work. on a residential street. But a Smoky Bones? No. So there's reasons why things are the way they are. And because people have asked for it, I would say don't just say, well, then we should give it to them. Make sure your process says either we think that was wrong that they didn't do it, or there's a reason they didn't do it, and that's why we're not doing it now, you know? So let's make sure to keep the process, the integrity of that intact. That's what I'm asking for. The second thing I want to make note of is it's ironic that there was clarity given tonight that the public hearing is not a meeting, it's a public hearing. Amazing that that seems to be very important tonight, but it wasn't important during the whole viaduct process. I'm telling you, things we have preached about over and over regarding the viaduct keep coming back. And I think it was worth pointing out that was said tonight. Funny that it wasn't said when we were saying it for 5 years. The next thing I want to touch base on is when I come up here, it's not just because I love my community and I want Erie to be the best community it can be. There is an American Institute Architects Code of Ethics, which implores me and my colleagues to come forward and try to share information that will better inform council so they can make better decisions. In our Code of Ethics, Section ES 1.3, Natural and Cultural Heritage, members should respect and help conserve their natural and cultural heritage while striving to improve the environment and the quality of life within it. And right after that is the clause on human rights. Members should uphold human rights in all their professional endeavors. That is why there's people like me fighting for social justice. Elsewhere in the Code of Ethics, there's the Environmental Equity and Justice clause that says members should promote fairness and safety in providing professional services and make reasonable efforts to advise their clients and employers of their obligations to the environment, including access to clean air, water, sunlight, and energy for all, sustainable production, extraction, transportation, and consumption practices, a built environment that equitably supports human health and well-being and is resistant to climate change, and restoring degraded or depleted natural resources. Cultural, heritage, environment, we are implored by our own professional code of ethics to fight for that. That's why we're registered with the state. And I would suggest that there are other professions that have similar ethics that implore them to speak up when things are going awry, or at least look like they should get a better look. I say that, and that means you do not make statements like there is no housing I would want to live in, or any neighbor I would want to live next to on the east side. Do you know how shocking that is to me, that any member of my profession would make that statement? So I ask that you consider how important these things are when you make certain decisions. Thank you.
Elspeth Cayley, 1232 West 11th Street. I see on the agenda recommendation by Mayor Schimber that Mr. Jason Wizarek is appointed to the Erie Planning Commission. I just want to read a quote from Mr. Wizarek from a New York Times article from a few months back. He says, "I cannot find the type of housing with neighbors I would want to live with on the east side." Mr. Wizarek added, "We need to prepare people to move out of those neighborhoods." First of all, I don't think it's a very good idea to encourage disinvestment in the east side. And in the state that the city's in, I just think that it's in extremely poor taste to even consider appointing someone who would say something like that about like a quarter of our city. Those are our neighbors, those are our neighborhoods, those are our friends and family. Extremely poor taste if this architect is appointed. Just want to be on record saying that. Thank you. Oh, and of course, I support the community college. Thank you.
Michael Keys, East 3612 Reed Street, Erie, PA. And I would just also like to ask, council to really consider, who you make and who you give appointments to, because it is crucial and it is critical. I'm a resident of the East Side, and it literally hurt my heart to think that, one, somebody who was close to, administration would make those comments, but two, to see that they continue to be supported by the administration. And so it's my hope that, that you take that into consideration when you vote later. Two, we have to find a way to find affordable training and education for the next generation. There's a program today about, inequity in our city. There's been many studies, including the city study, that says diversity and inclusion are needed if we're going to become a world-class city. And so one of the things that we have to solve is the problem with getting the rest of our citizens involved in our economic structure here in the city. It's not going to work if we don't make a pathway for our young people to have family-sustaining jobs. It's not going to work. What we have seen in society is we've seen temples built, we've seen civilizations rise, and we've seen them abandoned. It's in vogue now to go see the Mayan ruins, to go see the pyramids, to go see the great things that people thought people needed, and people walked away from them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys.
My name's Paul McCummins. I live at 921 West 36th Street. I'll be your shortest conversation tonight. I asked, I don't know if he's Sal, don't remember how to pronounce his last name, about getting hearing devices so that I could come to a meeting and hear things. Took a couple weeks. They called me. I'm here today. I got it on, and it works. I had gone to a trip on Alaska and spent thousands of dollars. Went to lots of places, couldn't hear. So I got mad. I started a fight, and I've won everything that I've gone through. And so I thought, well, I should come to Erie, where I live, and I should not have to decide, well, can I hear at that event? The only thing I want to ask you is, you have a sign up there. If any of you belong to the Jeffersonian Society, I don't, but I go once in a while. When they sell your ticket, you're over on one side. On the other side, they got 5 or 10 of the devices out. You don't have to ask for it, and if you don't get to that meeting soon enough, you don't get one. Most people with a hearing problem won't ask for it, but they won't come. And so you will help them if you have this. And by the way, the law also says that if you have this meeting someplace else, or this mayor has a meeting someplace, that if I want to come, I should be able to hear it. And so that's fair warning. I want you to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Martha Wachuku, 711 Myrtle Street. I want to speak in support to the resolution that was removed tonight about the community college. I think a city of this size with its poverty numbers definitely needs one. And I want to speak to something else that I feel like there's never a good time for it, especially given our city's deficit, but I want to talk about community spaces and the lack thereof in Perry Square. I know funding is an issue, but I think between the public and private partnerships, given that we have food trucks in the area, restaurants in the area, community members, university students, workers that gather in Perry Square, that we need tables where people can eat lunch. tables where people can play chess and just make it a more communal space. And I guess today being the first day of spring, it was on my mind again today. So thank you for your time.
Do you have any other citizens to be heard this evening? Any other citizens to be heard? Takes us to the agenda road.
Ordinances for final passage. Council File 16079, official ordinance number 19/2019, an ordinance in accordance with the 2019 City of Erie Capital Fund budget. The sum of $30,498 is appropriated from unappropriated and anticipated revenue for its use by the City of Erie. By Mr. Kwiatkowski and second by Ms. Allen, that Council File Ordinance Bill number 16079, and now known as official ordinance number 19/2019, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City Council passed official file ordinance number 19/2019 finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council File 16080, official ordinance number 20/2019, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $18,000 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue to be received from the Enterprise Zone Revolving Loan Fund for utilization in the flagship fund. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, second by Ms. Allen, the Council File Ordinance Bill number 16080, and now known as official file ordinance number 20/2019, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City Council passed official file ordinance number 20/2019 finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council File 16081, official ordinance 21/2019. An ordinance appropriating the sum of $15,650 from unappropriated and anticipated revenue and providing for the expenditure thereof, tobacco compliance grant. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Ms. Allen, the Council File Ordinance Bill number 16081, and now known as official file ordinance number 21/2019, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City Council will pass official file ordinance number 21/2019 finally by yea 7, nay 0. Council File 16082, official ordinance number 22/2019, an ordinance appropriated the sum of $162,000 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for the expenditure thereof. Contribution is from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Department of Community and Economic Development for the Early Intervention Program. By Mr. Kwiatkowski, or by Mr. Jones, seconded by Mr. Kwiatkowski, that Council File Ordinance Bill number 16082, and now known as official file ordinance number 22/2019, be finally passed by the City Council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City Council passed official file ordinance number 22/2019 finally by yea 7, nay 0. Ordinances for first reading. Council File 16083, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $24,998 from unappropriated and unanticipated revenue for the expenditure thereof. Contribution is from the Siebenberger Club for the purchase of a heat humidity fuming chamber for the ID unit. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Mr. Jones, that council file ordinance number 16083, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16083 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading. Council file 16084, an ordinance authorizing an increase in the non-electoral debt of the city of Erie, County, Pennsylvania, by authorizing and approving the issuance and sale in the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $87,235,000 federally taxable general obligation note Series A of 2019, general obligation note Series B of 2019, and general obligation bond Series C of 2019 for the purposes recited herein, directing the city clerk to prepare, certify, and file the required debt statement and to take all other necessary action, covenanting that the city shall include the amount of annual debt service in its budget for each fiscal year, providing for registered notes and bonds, dates of the notes and bonds and payment dates, providing for facsimile signature, seal, and authentication, approving the form of the notes and bonds paying agents, authentication certificate, endorsement, and registration, providing for temporary notes and bonds, providing for the maximum stated principal maturity amounts and fixing the maximum rates of interest on the notes and bonds, awarding the notes and bonds at private sale, creating sinking funds, authorizing the proper officers of the city of Erie, or of the city, to contract with bank for its services as a sinking fund depository and paying agent, authorizing and directing the city clerk to certify and file with the Department of Community and Economic Development certified copies of the necessary proceedings, covenanting that the proceeds of the 2019 B notes and the 2019 C bonds shall not be used in such manner as to cause the 2019 B notes and the 2019 C bonds to be arbitrage notes or bonds under federal tax law provisions, authorizing the proper officers of the city to do all necessary things to carry out the ordinance, providing for municipal bond insurance, and rescinding all inconsistent ordinances. By Mr. Kwiatkowski and seconded by Ms. Allen, the council file ordinance number 16084, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16084 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading. Council file 16085, an ordinance appropriating the sum of $14,811.36 from appropriated and anticipated revenue from PA Emergency Management Agency for firefighting, training, and rescue equipment. By Mrs. Schaaf, second by Mr. Jones, the council file ordinance number 16085, having been read, is hereby adopted on first reading by the city council. Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Schaaf, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. City council read and adopt council file ordinance number 16085 by yeas 7, nays 0 on first reading. That'll take us to new business.
I would like to separate number 4.
First, do we have a second?
Do we have a motion to move the balance?
Second. would like to separate
separation.
number 4.
Which one, Kathy?
Number 4.
Any other separations, council?
All right, moving the balance of the agenda, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Arrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Potowski, Mrs. Schuff, Mr. Witherspoon, Mr. Winarski. By Mr. Winarski, seconded by Mr. Witherspoon, resolved by the Council of the City of Erie that the proper city officials are authorized and directed upon the recommendation of Mayor Joe Schember that Mr. Jason Wazork will be appointed to the Erie Planning Commission for your four-year term expiring December 31st, 2022, and Ms. Erica Jenkins will be appointed for a 2-year term expiring December 31st, 2020, in order to stagger terms to replace Mr. Thomas Tippy Dworzanski and Mr. Donna Marinelli, whose terms have expired. Both new appointments will be eligible to renew 4-year terms. In addition, Mayor Schember is appointing Ms. Mary Rennie and Ms. Amanda Burlingham as 2 alternates to the Erie Planning Commission, whose terms will expire December 31st, 2022. Discussion?
Yes. I attend the planning commissions, and I have been even when I wasn't the liaison for them. And I also like the zoning meetings as well, and I attend those as much as I can. And I really like those 2 things, zoning and planning commission. To me, it's like the meat and potatoes of a dinner. You sit in and you listen and you hear about architecture going up and all different kinds of plannings and dealings, what's going to be coming perhaps, what's, maybe going to be blighted and whatnot. And to me, it's just been a wonderful time of learning so much about the city and how things operate. And I met Mr. Jason Wazorek and Ms. Erica Jenkins at the February Planning Commission meeting. They were sitting there, and I welcomed them, and I was very friendly with them, and they're very nice people. Nothing against them whatsoever. They're educated adults. They have a lot of skill sets behind them and a lot to offer, indeed. Their companies are very reputable and very well known in the city of Erie as well. And nothing against those companies. They employ great people. I know many people, for instance, at Erie Insurance Exchange, and I am glad that they do employ so many people. I believe they are the #1 employer in the city of Erie. However, my concern is of the business that they are about. I accidentally actually put 2 badges on today. And this first badge is my Monday, Wednesday, Friday job. I've been in education for 81 years. And when I retired from a classroom full-time, it was a big change for me because you identify yourself as part of your job as an educator and what have you. Well, I'm thinking, these people work for this wonderful company, but at the same time, is there a conflict of interest? That's just my question out there. Is there a conflict of interest? One time, I was sitting on the Planning Commission, and an architect came up and he presented in front of the Planning Commission. And I'm wondering if all the talkings that going on during a planning commission, who's to say that perhaps they have the knowledge of what's going on in the planning commission? Can that be put to use in their occupation? Who's to say that? I was elected by the people as a watchdog, and even though these two people are very well reputable in their job and profession, I just can't help to think that, you know, maybe there will be a time that there is a conflict of interest. I don't know, you know, what it is. It's just, I'm just putting it out there. And that's why I'm voting no. My colleague Liz Allen has voted no on things before as far as appointments, and nothing against you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I am backing you in so many different ways, and this is just something that's close to my heart that I want to put out there. Thank you.
Mr. President, can I respond to that? Yeah, Kathy Schaaf sent an email to all of us raising concerns about these two appointments to the Planning Commission. So I contacted Kathy Rosdick, who is the planning director, because I trust her judgment. We have a planning director for the first time in forever. And so I'm also bringing to this my experience of having been on boards, and I know how you build boards. You want to build expertise. So this is what Kathy replied to me. I'd like to make a few comments about the skill set needed on the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is essentially our citizen planner, and as such should have a background or a base understanding of areas that pertain to land use decisions and the potential long-term impacts they have on our community. Areas of background experience we would typically want to see and why include the following: business owners, since they understand economic drivers and how decisions with regard to zoning can impact customers and businesses' bottom line. Attorneys bring a perspective of impacts from policy decisions, which would be Erica Jenkins, who's nominated. Landscaped architects and or professional architects are particularly helpful due to their understanding of construction, cost of construction, and global view of aesthetics. Neighborhood organizers are those who are active within the community as they bring the interest of residents to the city. They must all be citizens. If there's a conflict of interest, then the ethics laws that govern all boards, authorities, and commissions would apply. So I don't see the commission as being special in this capacity. The American Planning Association also adheres to a code of conduct for citizen planners that speaks to ethical practices, and I believe our bases are covered for current and future appointees. So I support this appointment. I also want to speak about something else, which is the New York Times. It's been a while since I've talked about that New York Times story. Jason Wazorek said that his quotes were taken out of context. He apologized if he was misinterpreted. Jason has been a member of the Young Erie Professionals, the Erie Downtown Partnership Design Committee, the Board of Directors of our West Bayfront, and the Blighted Property Review Committee. I looked up their credentials on LinkedIn, and Erica Jenkins is a graduate of the University of Michigan, Wayne State, Nova, Southeastern University, and has been a child mentor for the Bar Association. These are two really good, strong appointments, and I just want to speak back to that New York Times story, because I was cleaning out some files or organizing my. You'll remember when all the viaduct controversy was going on, I would bring that huge folder with me. So I was looking through it the other day. I had so much stuff in there, I had to actually separate it into two folders. And because I am a journalist, after I was interviewed by the New York Times reporter, I went home and I wrote a mock lead about the way that guy was going to frame that story. I forgot that I had written it. So I found it in my folder and I showed it to my husband, who's also a journalist. I said, I was right on. That guy had a way that he was framing that story from the moment, well, before he even came to Erie. He used none of the information I gave him, despite an hour-long interview. So please do not base your judgment on one person based on those quotes in the New York Times story. So anyhow, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for nominating two people who have good credentials. and bringing some diversity to what had not had any diversity on the board before. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you, Liz, for letting us know about that, because at first I was going to vote no for Jason because of those remarks. I live on the east side, and we need all the economic development that we can get over on the east side. And when you put negative things in papers and magazines, you know, that's not good, you know, because Erie, we're a whole, we're one community. We need economic development all over our city. So I was planning on voting no for Jason, but since you clarified that, I'm gonna go ahead and vote yes on it.
Dowski.
Well, I'll make it a tie. I'm voting no, based on my first conversations with Ms. Schaaf. I see some conflicts, but when I was made aware of the comments, and I always like how people try to dance away from their comments. When I made comments, I never got that kind of respect from the media. It was a comment. And usually, you know, I read the article just now, and I find it appalling. Basically, he's told me to move out of my side of town. I know, taken out of context. It's funny how it's always taken out of context. But to the East Siders, it's not funny anymore. You know, I bought that house over there. I don't know if he's talking about my neighborhood, north of my neighborhood, south of my neighborhood. I really don't care. But I don't think any of us who are in government should ever say anything or representing government, misquoted or not. You have to be careful what you say. Your words are your words, and your words are your bond. And I have no confidence in somebody that couldn't find one house on the east side to live in or one set of neighbors to live with, because I sure did. And I just, that's not it alone, but I'm prepared to vote no.
Mr. President, I don't want them in my neighborhood anyway. If he don't want to live in the neighborhood, fine. He have a right to live anywhere he want to live. I'm not going to leave my neighborhood on the east side because he made a statement or he was misquoted. We get misquoted every day. Every day we hear we get misquoted. Conflict of interest. I sit on a board. We reviewed 6 proposals today. And I was asked to abstain on all because of a conflict of interest. I knew everybody that came in there. Who don't I know? And who don't know me? I told them I wasn't going to abstain because I knew this guy, this lady, this person. You know, it gets me upset when we allow the media to alter your way of thinking based on the information that you know that is right or wrong. If he made the statement, shame on him. If he was misquoted, then shame on who said that. We have something to do. We represent the city of Erie, not Allentown, not Tennessee. I hear all these cities thrown up today. This is Erie. We are unique. We have certain issues that we have to deal with in Erie, not Tennessee, not Cincinnati, because what work in Philadelphia will not work in Erie. We can take a little piece of the pie, but don't take the whole pie. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'd just like to make a very quick one. As council always, as in the past, has appointed people to different authorities or different boards, we as council members do our homework and we try to pass it on to our colleagues, whether it be via resumes or by our personal knowing of the applicant for that board or that authority. And be honest with you, a lot of names come in front of us here on council that we don't know. And I trust in the administration, just like I trust in my colleagues. When they put an appointment in front of this council, they did their due diligence and their homework that we're putting a viable person on whichever board or authority. So I'm going to continue to have that trust in my colleagues and the mayor and the administration in putting the best or the one of the best candidates for that said board. So thank you.
Mr. President, I wasn't going to make, if I could, I wasn't going to make a comment, and I apologize for speaking after you as you round things up. I really do. I struggle. I understand miscontext and out of context. I totally get that. I've been talking enough. I could probably be like an alien or something that could take anything out of context. I don't know that there was an apology. I mean, I trust and take your word for that.
I was there at the Blighted Property Review Committee the next day when he came in and apologized for, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
No, you're fine.
But I also want to, I'm sorry, I just want to go back and say, it's the whole tenor of the story was shaped before that reporter came here, so.
Yeah,
He found something to base his narrative on.
And I get that, and I don't want to, I really, belaboring the point. I guess if there was an apology, and I get that, we've all made mistakes or been misquoted or said something in the moment of an interview that, probably shouldn't have said it that way or shouldn't have said that. Literally, the reason I waited to even make a statement is because I really don't know, even right now, what I want, how I want to vote, because that's a glaring statement. You know what I mean? And not only, you have a right to live wherever you want. Like, if you can afford it to do and come and go, I want everybody to live in Erie. Everybody can't live in Erie. You know what I mean? Everybody has the desire and the opportunity, if they have it, to live where they choose, wherever they're, every bit of housing is income-based. Some people's income is just higher. It is what it is. But when the statement says neighbors that I would live next to, that's the piece that touches my heart, because that's a little bit different. Maybe I'm taking it personal as a black man in Erie, who was a kid that was raised and born on the east side. I don't know. I'm really struggling with that. I don't want to vote no because I don't have the same concerns about the other appointee on this resolution. Again, and we've all made mistakes, so we can't hold people's stuff for years and years and years forever because people change and make mistakes and all that. I get that, but I just would recommend, and this is the planning commission too, so it's twice as heavy. That statement is significant because you're talking about how the city is going to be planned and zoning and where people do live and how that certain neighborhoods where the money is going to be funneled and channeled and facilitated in the city. And if you have a bias against one portion, it makes me wonder. With that said, I'm going to vote for because I believe people make mistakes, and I believe people probably could restate some things, and I could myself, honestly. But I would hope that the sentiment of the work that all of our appointees, and we as council, as elected officials, is to allow whatever our personal biases are to not get in the way of our professional decision making. And I think that's the piece. You can live wherever you want, and quite honestly, you might not want to live next to me, and I probably don't want to live next to you, and that's okay. But I can't let that bias get in the way of me doing my job right for the whole of the city. And so I will give that, and respect it. I mean, I'm one of 7 votes, so it is what it is. But I would like to see if he has, and he does have the expertise to do what this appointment would allow him to do. So we'd like to give him that opportunity, and I would do that with my vote to support it. But man, I really hope that that was a blurb in the matrix and a glitch and not his real sentiment, and not how he will facilitate his appointment as a part of the planning commission, representing the whole of the city. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Mayor, you want to make?
Like I said, just for what it's worth, Jason did not say what was quoted. He never intended that. I can tell you the day after that article was published, he came to me very upset by what it said. What he was trying to say is no one should live in a blighted neighborhood, regardless of your color of your skin, your race. Everyone should have a good neighborhood. And that's the point he was trying to make. They took it and twisted it, as Liz said, to their purposes. I can tell you Jason is a very open-minded. He's not a racist. He didn't say what they said in that article.
Maybe he should file I don't know if it's libel or some kind of case, because they have him in quotes saying, I don't want to live in that area, and I want to live next to them people. I can't find people that I want to live next to. Like, that's a quote. I mean, and I don't want to run from that, and I don't want to condemn the man either, because God knows, all of us. But the perception, and then when we jump to perception, and everything is how people perceive it. So if an average East Sider who doesn't get the privilege of all the information that we as council have to know his credentials, his history, your vetting of him and your staff's vetting, we just seek article. And it's like, okay, now he's gonna help make planning decisions for the city. Is he ever gonna do anything on the East Side? And it just further perpetuates. So I think, again, it's a relatively moot point, probably has the votes, but I just want us to be aware, like that means something. Even though have the opportunity to kind of work and navigate through it, the average citizen that this could come to or read that article, and believe it or not, people read, they really actually pay attention a lot of times, they can recognize the name. And I just want us to be sure that and be aware that those things do happen. People do make those connections. And I just think it's important that we're aware of that, and we are all aware of what we say, because again, I'm over talking. I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I just wanted to say that I didn't say anything about the quote. I was just talking about being an architect and how maybe he would want, right.
Rose, call for the vote, please.
All right.
Mr. President, call for the choke board.
Vote board.
And since we haven't used it, so if you don't come up wrong, you got a chance to change it.
When you're ready.
Watch mine come up wrong.
We all hit it at once?
Yeah, well,
Then he hits the top.
They say it.
Is it the opposite or something?
it shouldn't be.
So,
Well, you still have time to change it. We need to practice.
Who's not in here?
Why don't you turn it off, let's do it again.
Huh?
Turn it off, we'll do it again.
Okay,
Maybe somebody push
I
it.
cleared it.
Okay, now let's, ready? Now we vote,
Okay, it looks like everybody will tabulate.
All right. Ms. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Arrington? Mr. Jones? Mr. Kotowski? Mrs. Shaw? Mr. Witherspoon? Mr. Winarski? This resolution will adopt 5 yeas to 2 nays. And that, Mr. President, takes us to committee reports.
Already? Let's start with Mr. Jones. Maybe he's still out of breath, but go ahead.
You know, I was off for a year. I got to make up for this. Thank you, Mr. President. I think for the sake of, sometimes it seems like things just kind of flow through us really smoothly and really maybe uninterrupted with dialogue or comment. And a lot of that comment does happen in the back room. And I know sometimes the citizenry may not recognize or think all this extra conversation is meaningful, but I think it is to have honest conversation, to have honest debate, and to inquire things and challenge and question things, because we are not, we all have our thoughts and opinions, and we have the right and responsibility to ask those questions on the behalf of ourselves, but also and more so on behalf of the citizenry. So I value that kind of stuff, besides the fact that I just enjoy debate and conversation anyway. In relation to the zoning request, you know, great idea and concept, what I know about the proposed development. I think we need to find ways and places that are underutilized, of course, to bring them back on the tax rolls, to do, you know, just quality of life in that area, aesthetics, all those things. A question I meant to ask, amongst all the other things that I asked, was a time frame, if there was a time frame for the project. So I know this is not the time to respond, but maybe if all things go smoothly according to what your desire is, if we could have an idea of what your time frame would be for completion of project and you know, actual things being in place and ready to go. And the other question, and maybe it's a good question not to ask online, or you have your answer online, is LRTA related to that? The opportunity for potential LRTA incentive and benefit, is that connected to your future plan? If LRTA doesn't happen, does this not happen? Or again, you don't have to answer that now, just maybe a side conversation for the future. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. I know there was some conversation around LRTA. We had some information from the administration, and respectfully and specifically from the mayor, handed it to us this evening after some meetings earlier. And so I look forward to kind of going through what that looks like and how we can do what's best for our citizens and for the area of economic development and growth in our city. And finally, I know Ms. Twilley was here earlier, a citizen that spoke about a roof and some of the challenges she's had kind of navigating our programs in the city or county. And I think, and I don't know if she's done this, I know that she had, not to be overly personal, but there were some health challenges and some things that she was experiencing at one point. And if those are still realities, I don't know how much she, excuse me, oh, she's still here, has used, or let that information be known to those folks, because there are different tracks for those who maybe have more extreme physical needs or debilitating issues, health concerns, or things of that nature. So if you haven't gone that track, I'm sure there are other people I saw speaking to you earlier, but if not, you know, I'd be willing to help out with that and to be supportive of that as well. The Erie School, so the water that we talked about today with Mr. Wojtek, and I don't want to get into the debate of fluoride, you know, everything that has, you know, you have to have two sides to have a conversation, so I get that. My concern is, and it's maybe not for us particularly, but for our citizens to know that the Erie School District site that had the very high testing of lead level, for me it was important to know that that didn't come from us and the product that we're providing through our water authority for those students. And so I'm sure the school district, I know they're doing everything they can. I actually work in that school twice a week. I teach career readiness classes to a lot of those students. And just to see that and then to see the news report, it's like, what is really going on? And so it would be great to know what the school district is doing, if they rectified the issue. I haven't been there this week, you know, so I'll be there probably tomorrow to find out if they're still drinking water out of coolers. Which is very distracting, because that is a particularly unique school program, and all of these extra distractions are further distractions in that venue and in that school. So those are just a couple concerns I had. I will be able to, our next meeting, report more on some authority and liaison positions and assignments. Also, we will be meeting with the police chief after our first meeting of the month, next month, in April. And so if you would be prepared to have questions, concerns, and answers for concerns and questions for the police chief about our public safety situation in our community. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Mr. Kwiatkowski.
Quick update. I met with ECOG committee last week at a work session at Harbor Creek. Main topic of conversation was the upcoming census. And the gentleman that was there, the representative that will be working with the city, was very adamant that we get a real good count. And what surprised me was the outlying communities agreed with us that there will be problems in the city. We will have some residents that won't feel comfortable and they're gonna have to be made comfortable. And it's gonna be up to the city to work with various agencies to make people understand that this is strictly a count. And it's important, as the mayor said on TV, that we get an accurate count. Like I said, not all people are gonna be really looking forward to having representatives of government coming to the door. And we have to once again emphasize that this is a very important count, and that we need to work with the International Institute, with various social agencies, and that how important it is that we do get a count is for the benefit of all of us. And I hope the mayor will, join council with him so we can help in that endeavor. Once again, I hope we get above the 100,000 mark. Also, we met with police pension and the O&E pension, and both of them are fully recovered from the bad quarter of last year, and making progress once again, positive progress, and that's good report. Finally, we met today there were three of us there, with the mayor, and an unusual time when all three members, the county, the school district, and the city met at the same table, which is a good thing. And we all discussed the LRTA. We had some questions. We're gonna meet again to resolve those questions, those concerns. I think everybody's on the track that it's a good thing, but we just wanna make sure that what we do in the final phase is what's best for the city and what's best for all of us. And I look forward to more dialogue, and with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Arrington.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I'm very disappointed that we didn't get approved for the community college. Erie is so behind time. You look around, you have all these cities who have community college, and we really need it here. You know, I just graduated from college, Mercyhurst, last year, and I wish I could hand somebody my bill from them. You know, we living in a society where the poverty is high. And you know, if these kids can get a chance to go to a community college, that's a chance of a lifetime. So I really appreciate everybody who put all their work into the community college. Ron, Mr. Horton, everybody, it's a lot of people. We need to continue to do that. And even us as elected officials, all the elected officials, state reps, we need to continue to back this community college, because our youth is our future, and this community college is their future. So we definitely need this community college. So let's all continue to work together and get this pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Allen.
Okay. All right, I attended the Blighted Property Review Committee meeting on March 13th and the City Land Bank meeting just this last Monday. And I think one of the things I'm learning from the Land Bank meetings, where I'm the liaison, I'm not on the land bank, but it's such a complex process to move property into the hands of the Erie Redevelopment Authority for demolition or rehabilitation. This is one of the documents we got about the due diligence that the solicitor is working on to make sure that there's clear title to those properties. So there's also, the land bank is going to be developing, the city land bank is going to be developing a website, so I think that's a good idea. You'll be able to get information and keep up to date on that. I attended a job shadow day on Monday. It was sponsored by the Elected Women of Erie County, a bipartisan group. So a group of young women from the Quality of Life Center, mostly New Americans, came to the courthouse and spent time with different people. What was really impressive is that these teenagers are all determined to go on to some type of college, some type of post-secondary education. A number of these women, young women, mentioned that they might go into the military so that then they would have the resources later to be able to go to college. So you're exactly right, Sonia, when you're talking about the affordability issue. And my favorite question they asked me was whether I had ever been told I couldn't do something because of my gender. And I don't know, I probably have been, but if someone told me I couldn't do something because of my gender, I certainly would not do it just because of my gender. I agree with Kaz and Jim Wynorski was there today too. That meeting on the LRTA was a really good meeting. I had my computer out. Sometimes people are saying, why are you Googling while you're up there? But we have people who come up and say things. For instance, a citizen came up tonight and said that Canal Side in Buffalo was built without any kind of tax incentive, and I looked it up, and there was a huge amount of money that came from the state of New York in terms of tax incentives to get Canal Side built. I was interested in the riverfront development in Fort Wayne because I used to live in Fort Wayne, and it looks like that there were some kind of tax credits that were available there. So, and it also said that the Fort Wayne riverfront development is primarily a public projects that are going in there in terms of, I think they're building a parking ramp. This is the kind of thing where they're putting public money in there. So please don't take everything that somebody says as gospel unless you double check everything. So I didn't have a chance to check all those other cities, but Melry, when he was talking about, we're Erie, we aren't, we're whatever. Go and get the facts. Canal Side was not built strictly with private money. I also attended the Lake Erie Environmental Forum yesterday at the Tom Ridge Environmental Center for a couple of different hats that I wear. There were a lot of really good information about environmental issues facing Erie, and I think that that's something that City Council should start to think about. Do we need a committee on environmental action? I think that the pedestrian and bicycle task force is a good idea, especially, when people coming up here and talking about, again, the traffic on the Bayfront Parkway. I happened to be at the library when our former colleague, Bob Mursky, was having the Second Chance Job Fair. I think that was last week. Huge attendance there, huge attendance. That new state law, the Clean Slate Law, applies to people with misdemeanors. The sponsor of that legislation is going to hopefully take it forward and look and see about clearing records if you've had a felony. There were a lot of people there with questions, and the big takeaway was that people want to work. They want to be able to work, but sometimes those criminal records are impeding them. So I just wanted to thank Representative Mursky for tapping into that and providing information to people. Last thing, well, two things. Congratulations to the Mercyhurst men's basketball team, which is going to the Elite 8 in Division II. And when I talked to our president about is it okay to mention that Mercyhurst thing, he also mentioned during the NCAA selection Sunday that there was this great ad for bookit.com that mentioned Erie. So if you haven't seen it, it was really cool about somebody wanting to come and spend their vacation in Erie. So thank you, Jim, for bringing that up.
I was as surprised as you. But Mr. Witherspoon.
How are you tonight, Mr. Mayor? Good. I'd rather talk to you than the president. Mr. President, I would like to yield the balance of my time to Councilwoman Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Witherspoon. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Chevalier. I can't wait till your project goes up. Thank you for the patience involved. I've talked with other people in different cities, and they're sort of, things just have to take time when you go through zonings and things like that. But I'm really looking forward to seeing your project come into fruition. Thank you to Mr. Paul Wojtek for speaking today on behalf of the Water Authority. I have a Water Authority meeting tomorrow. And Ms. Tooley, I talked with you on the phone. Don't give up hope. There's got to be somewhere, some people out there who are going to get you your roof. So people in Erie are pretty good. So just have to get the word out, and we'll see what happens. So tonight, you being up here for your 5 minutes, there may be someone watching who is willing to assist you, and I will keep in touch with you as well. I thank Judy Roth for being here. You spoke along with Ron DiNicola and Andre Horton at the Empower Erie meeting that I attended a couple Saturdays ago. I am for a community college as well. I saw it in my own family with my daughter in Orlando, Florida, was able to attend a college, Valencia, and then she was going to move up into a nursing program. So it's not over. David Brennan actually got council to approve this 2 years ago, June 2017. So we were for it then. We just have to get it rolling. So thank you. I went to the HRCA meeting yesterday, and we will be needing some people there. My person that I nominated in September had some family matters, and she resigned. So she, and then there's 2 other appointments, but I don't know, just to let you know, okay, Mr. President. Sure. And I am thankful to Liz and the people for getting the Historic Preservation Task Force going. If we can restore buildings and we can save animals, then surely, though, we can save people. And I was with some friends from Pittsburgh over the weekend, and there's Pittsburgh churches, and I even read this online, that are going to be using their parking lots for over a 90-day period where homeless people who are living in their cars can park in the parking area. And that's good for Pittsburgh for recognizing and taking on the concern of the homeless people. And Philadelphia as well has Sister Mary Scullion, and it's called Project Home, and I encourage anyone to get on the internet and read about Project Home. She is a Catholic sister who wholeheartedly is solving the homeless crisis in Philadelphia. So if we can use some examples of bigger cities, then so be it. My friends told me a story about a man named Calvin who was homeless in Pittsburgh, and he lived on top of a building. I can't remember which one they said. And people knew he was there, and people saw him day to day. They said hi to Calvin, and Calvin died on top of the building, and nobody knew he was there for a little bit, and they found him. And he had this wonderful, beautiful funeral service. The entire community of people, made sure that Calvin had this great service. But yet, why didn't they take care of him when he was living? So I hope that our Erie people and the boards, the people out there continue to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. I'll be brief, but I just want to thank my colleagues on council. There is a lot going on in this town, and there's a lot that needs to be looked into, taken care of, and really, I appreciate, as council president, the due diligence you guys are doing. We did meet, like we said, with the mayor and the county, the school district regarding LERTA. And today, I honestly believe we took a great step forward in coming to a agreement with all the taxing bodies. Sure, there's some fine stuff that would need to be addressed, but I think on the whole, we got a pretty good plan in place with the mayor and Mr. Groner presenting it to council, and what has happened with the LERTA, I believe we're now I put it, has become a little stagnant. We need something to re-energize this LERTA and expand it and move on with it, because we need to move on. So with that being said, another thing on our agenda for first reading, we had a issuance to raise our debt for the city of Erie. Grant you, it's a first reading. We haven't voted on it yet. We will get more descriptions, more increments about it, whether what exactly they're going to use it on or what it is intended to be used on. I know naturally in the past, equipment for the city, paving, everybody has that gray area of it's tough to borrow money for something that isn't going to last so long, but was on here for first reading. We are going to get, like I said, dissect it a little more and see exactly where and how much we are going to add to our debt. Just want to thank Ms. Shaw for having Mr. Wojtek come in, speak with council this evening, as well as him having the time to speak to the citizens of Erie also regarding our water quality and some of the issues that have been brought up. And other than that, that's all I have for tonight.
I just wanted council to be aware that the reports that are required by the state for the pension funds have been filed and completed prior to the due date, which is March 31st. So those are done, and now we just wait until they're audited and go from there.
Great. Mayor Schimber.
Thank you, President. Just a couple things. One is I just wanted to make clear that the city's finances are in very good shape. You know, the way we presented the budget, we presented that 5-year projection that assumes that we don't do anything in terms of raising taxes or lowering expenses, which of course we will as we move forward. We actually have about a $10 million surplus right now, so we have that safety valve there. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on, you know, the budget out in the public, and I just wanted to have a chance to make that statement. Our early intervention plan will be starting soon. That early intervention plan will make recommendations of how we can reduce expenses and how we can increase income. And I've committed publicly several times that we will implement what they recommend we do, unless there's a very good reason, and you'll get a good explanation of the reason if there's any plan that they offer to us that we choose not to implement. The LERTA, I'm really very excited about the LERTA too. I appreciate the council members who were at the meeting earlier today talking about it. I really think this is what we need to really get things going in Erie, get more jobs for everyone, and we'll make sure, you know, that the diversity is honored, that we're not just moving people from one place to another. I think it's important. We still have a few details to get agreement with the school district and the county on, but I'm hoping that we can move forward on this very quickly, and you'll be involved, and I welcome your input. Freda and others that spoke about the community college, I'm 100% supportive of that as well, and certainly hope that we get that in place very quickly here. With regard to the census, one of the things, I don't know if you've been made aware of this yet, but one of the things the county executive and I and other municipalities have been talking about is we'd like to have an employee. There'll probably be a county employee of the county technically, or actually maybe a contracted employee, so not, but paid through the county, who will make sure that we get as many people counted as possible. We want everyone counted, and not just in Erie, of course, but across the entire county. So the county has already pledged $25,000 for that person. They're hoping the municipalities in the region, of which of course we're the largest, would contribute at least another $25,000, and then they're going to go for a $50,000 match of that from either the Community Foundation or ECRA or some source. So that the thought is that we'd get about $100,000 to not only pay a salary for this person. They'll probably be employed 14 months, from what I understand, over the course of starting later this year and then over the course of next year as the census is completed. So that's something you'll be hearing more about as we get more details. I haven't even had a chance yet to talk to, this is all new this week, haven't had a chance to talk to Paul Lichtenwalder about, you know, what can we afford from the city's perspective. Lastly, I also wanted to thank Shari Endeavors, Attorney Mailer, for the great presentation today. I too, like several of the council members, looking forward to when this gets started and when it gets completed. I can tell you, I think you guys saw the projections and the drawings of what it would look like and all that. Did you see? Yeah. And to me, people that haven't seen that, when you go to this new place over at 5th and Cranberry, you're going to feel like you're in Paris, France, not in Erie, Pennsylvania. It's an incredible thing for Erie. I'm really looking forward to it, and the sooner we can get it, the better. So everyone, have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, real quick, I misspoke. Our meeting with the police chief is going to be the first meeting in May, so I believe that's May 1st. We'll be meeting with the police chief. Thank you.
Okay, great. Rose, you have anything today?
I don't.
Mr. Betzler?
Witness demanded it. I will have a draft of a revised third ordinance based on our meeting today. That'll come out very beginning of next week.
Great, thank you. That, close it.
City Council adjourns at 9:53. Mr. Winarski, Ms. Allen, Mrs. Harrington, Mr. Jones, Mr. Potowski, Ms. Shaw, Mr. Witherspoon.